Welcome to Headstones and Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Vernon Rudolph, the man who gave the world the legendary Krispy Kreme donut. Vernon, it is an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Calvin.
It's a treat for us too, trust me. Let's dive right in. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
Well, Calvin, back in the 1930s, the Great Depression was hitting everyone hard. Money was tight and people were stressed. But I noticed that even when folks couldn't afford a luxury, they still craved a small, affordable comfort, something to brighten their day. I saw that a hot, fluffy, yeast-raised donut, sold cheaply, was exactly what people wanted. The skeptics thought I was crazy to try starting a business during a national economic crisis. I convinced them simply by making a batch of donuts using that secret recipe my uncle bought from a New Orleans chef. Once they smelled them and took a bite, the skepticism just melted away.
Food has a way of doing that. So, leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
In the summer of 1937, my life was packed into a 1936 Pontiac. I had about $20 in my pocket, 2 friends by my side, and a dream. We drove into Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because I was a smoker and noticed how successful Camel Cigarettes was there. I figured a town with a booming tobacco industry could support a new donut business. My core belief was that if you offer people a superior product made with pride, they will find you. That simple belief gave me the courage to spend my last dime renting a building in Old Salem.
Talk about cutting it close. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held on to that everyone else around you dismissed?
Everyone else looked at the numbers and the bad economy, but the one truth I held on to was that the sensory experience of baking would win out. People dismissed the idea of a simple donut shop scaling up. They thought it was a small-time trade. But I knew that the aroma of warm yeast, sugar, and frying dough was the best marketing campaign ever invented, even if I couldn't prove it on a spreadsheet yet.
And that aroma is undeniable. Now, long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong, and how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, it was right at the very start in Winston-Salem. After we paid our first month's rent for the building on South Main Street, our pockets were completely empty. We literally had no money left to buy flour, sugar, or yeast to make the first batch. It felt like the dream was dead before it even started. But I refused to quit. I walked down to a local grocer, looked him in the eye, and used every ounce of persuasion I had to get him to advance us the ingredients on credit. I promised him we'd pay him back after our first delivery run. He agreed, we made the donuts, sold them out of the back of the Pontiac, and paid him right back.
That is definition of hustle. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
Our original strategy was strictly wholesale, making donuts late at night and delivering them to local grocery stores. But our bakery was in a busy area, and the smell started drifting into the streets. People began walking up to the building between midnight and 4 a.m., knocking on the door, asking to buy them hot and fresh right out of the fryer. My partners thought it was a distraction from our main grocery business, but I responded by embracing it. I literally took a tool, cut a hole right in the bakery's brick wall, and installed a sales window so we could sell directly to the public. It turned out to be the best decision we ever made.
You literally broke down a wall for your customers. Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure. Whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt? How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
It wasn't easy, Calvin. In the 1940s, we were expanding and trying to maintain consistency across different locations, which brought immense pressure. I also faced terrible personal tragedy when my first wife, Ruth, passed away in a car accident in 1944. Balancing that deep personal grief with the responsibility of a growing business and employees who depended on me was the heaviest burden I ever carried. I shouldered it by focusing heavily on engineering and standardizing our processes, building our own donut-making machinery, and keeping my mind occupied on creating a beautiful culture for our workers.
I can't even imagine the strength that took, Vernon. Thank you for sharing that. Looking back at the early days, who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
The very first people to buy in were those local grocery store owners in Winston-Salem. And of course, that kind grocer who loaned us the ingredients. I convinced them by letting the product speak for itself. I didn't use fancy sales pitches. I just handed them a warm glazed donut. Once they saw how quickly the customers cleared them off the shelves, they were hooked.
Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
The big shift happened in the late 1940s and early 1950s. We created the Krispy Kreme Corporation in 1947, and we began building our own automated donut-making equipment and mixing plants. When I saw our proprietary mix being shipped out centrally, ensuring that a donut in Georgia tasted exactly like the one in North Carolina, I knew we had transitioned from a local bakery to something that was going to change the entire industry.
You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
I insisted on cleanliness and transparency. When we opened up our production line to the view of the public, what people later called a donut theater, it meant our workers had to maintain an absolute standard of excellence because the customer was watching them craft the product. I taught them that we weren't just selling food, we were selling a joyful, clean, and magical experience.
History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
People look at our famous green tiled roofs and glowing signs and think Krispy Kreme was an overnight retail success. The biggest misconception is that we started out as a retail shop. For years, we were a grueling, behind-the-scenes wholesale delivery operation. We worked through the middle of the night in the heat of the fryers just to get donuts to grocery store shelves by the morning. It took years of hard, dark hours before we became the bright, glowing retail shops people remember.
Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was time. In those early decades, I poured every ounce of my physical and mental energy into the company, working around the clock, which meant missing quiet moments. But looking back at the joy our shops brought to families and the legacy of quality we established up until my final days, I can say with a grateful heart that the sacrifice was worth it.
If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would say, trust the recipe, cut the hole in the wall, and keep the glaze warm, because the joy you create will carry you through the hardest nights.
That is beautiful. Vernon, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I just want to tell everyone to find their own version of a secret recipe in life. Whatever it is you love to do, and share it generously with others. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Calvin. It has been a wonderful experience to reminisce.
Thank you, Vernon. Wow, what an incredible look into the grit, heart, and sweet success behind one of the world's most beloved treats. From driving into town with $20 to literally cutting a hole in a wall to serve fresh donuts, Vernon Rudolph showed us what true founder vision looks like. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.